Folks, thanks for tuning in again today, the start of another week at Stockwell Day-to-Day News, and thanks for the increasing number of people who are watching and commenting, and we hope to see that growth continue. I want to look at some really amazing stuff that's been taking place over the weekend and how it's being reported differently depending on the news source. So we're talking, of course, about what can only be described as the spectacular let's call it intervention by the United States into the capital at Venezuela, the Delta Force troops, and the really, whatever side of the issue you're on, technically speaking and militarily speaking, the precision of this exercise is astounding. U.S. Delta Force going into the most highly fortified area in Venezuela and swooping in there in the middle of the night or 2 or 3 in the morning and obtaining, let's use that word, President Maduro and his wife, and they are back safely in New York City now and waiting trial. Remember, this is not a first example of this ever happening in history. 1989, of course, there was an invasion by the U.S. troops of Panama when the dictator there in Panama was ruining the country and had a widespread drug network, and Noriega was eventually dragged back, the president of Panama eventually dragged back New York City and actually wound up getting a 20-year drug sentence. So these interventions are not unheard of. They've happened many times. In this particular situation, what I'd like us to just reflect on quickly as we move through the podcast today is the difference in the way it is being broadcast depending on the actual media source. If it is a left-leaning cultural Marxist media source like the BBC, the CBC, CNN, and other such publications, then you're going to get a little more criticism in terms of this shouldn't have been done, this was illegal, oh my goodness, isn't this terrible? And in fact, there is multiple legal precedent for this type of thing and for the president to go ahead without informing Congress. But Congress in situations like this, as we've seen, does have some say in terms of will an intervention be continuing. And obviously this intervention was kind of in and out. And very interesting, what also doesn't get publicized on the culturally Marxist media, CNN, CBC, BBC, very little, if any, coverage about the huge celebrations on the streets in Venezuela that this Visho narco-terrorist, this President Maduro, who actually did lose the last election but claimed he won it and has stayed on in power, the celebration, not just on the streets there, but on the streets of the United States, the streets of Canada, where there's many Venezuelans who escaped and actually would like to go back to their country. So, the question comes, why won't so much of the media that many people watch, why don't they show the celebratory aspect of this from the people themselves who were subjected for years to this vicious dictator, this Maduro? And it's because Maduro, being a very strong socialist, he has always had policies which are very socialistic, doesn't allow for free markets, wants to see people kept down in terms of entrepreneurialism. And of course, some of these main media markets like CBC, like BBC, like CNN, themselves are culturally Marxist, so very left-leaning, and they can't stand the fact that citizens might actually want a type of a government that is, I hate to use the word, small c conservative, allows them more freedom, freedom to speak, freedom to invest, freedom to make choices. So what's happening there is these celebrations that are taking place in Venezuela actually go against the grain of what our culturally Marxist media celebrates. They always want to see a Marxist type of situation, small L Marxist, meaning a few elites controlling everybody else. And they also are very worried that every now and then you get one of these people on the streets of Venezuela shouting out Donald Trump's name, but not in a derogatory way, in a gratitude way, saying thank you for relieving us of this dictator. So if you want to get coverage that's going to truly inform you, you're going to have to look at outlets that are on both sides of the spectrum. It's similar to what's going on right now, the revolution. We hopefully it's successful in Iran, and on the streets of Iran, the Ayatollah Islamist regime is actually murdering many of the young people who are demonstrating. And again, very little coverage from the culturally Marxist media like CBC, CNN, BBC, etc., that are showing people shouting out praise for the United States. This is on the streets of Iran, and asking the United States to help. So keep this in mind. It's actually vicious what our mainstream media does not disclose. It's actually unprofessional and it's contemptible. But that's the way it is. You're not going to move them on that. That's the way they are controlled. So interesting seeing the different reactions in terms of what's being reported. There's another question emerging, of course, when something like this happens. Is this going to continue, or is there going to be similar interventions in Cuba? There's even rumors about Colombia. And keep in mind, Colombia, Cuba, of course, Venezuela, these are terrorism-supporting states. These are regimes that are a threat to the United States and actually to the rest of the free world. In contrast to what much media is trying to report, that Trump is just after the oil. He's been making it very clear, and his Secretary of State Rubio has made it very clear over the weekend and again today. They don't want to see Venezuelan oil continuing to go to terrorist regimes, which is what has been happening with Venezuela oil. They go against all the international sanctions and they fund these vicious regimes. And that's the other aspect that the U.S. is saying that has to stop. So we'll see if this spreads, but it sure does send a signal. An amazing timing of the raid by Delta Force in terms of scooping up Maduro, literally while he was meeting with, or in the middle of meetings with top Chinese officials, right in the middle of that. So a strong signal being sent there. And again, watch mainstream media. You know what they're doing. They're saying that China is going to take this intervention as a signal that it would be okay for them to intervene in Taiwan, for China to do that. And of course, it's a totally different situation. Taiwan has truly elected governments, truly free choice, free enterprise. They do not punish their citizens like those regimes in Venezuela. So very different, but China trying to use that as a bit of a way of saying, hey, we just might do this also. In Canada, there was a bit of an announcement that's getting some international coverage, and that's a former Minister of Finance, Liberal Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, already some time ago was designated to be a special representative to Ukraine from Canada. Now, she's of Ukraine descent herself, so that makes sense from that point of view. But now Ukraine itself has enhanced her role, given her another title, special representative, and looking at long-term restructuring and maybe even financing. And is this a good thing? Well, first of all, in all sincerity, I wish her well. Anything we can do, Canada can add, or United States, anybody can add to bring the terrible conflict to an end is good. However, you have to remember what she's bringing to Zelensky in Ukraine is her own deep-seated beliefs that debt really does not matter, that government spending with borrowed dollars doesn't really matter, raising taxes is an okay thing to do. So all of the fiscal principles that down through the last century have proven to make it difficult for a population to get ahead, make it difficult for individuals to be prosperous. Those are all of the economic, let's say, overlays that she is bringing into Ukraine. And she runs the risk. She's got to be careful of this. We know that corruption, and that is corruption at the highest levels, where money that's being given from other countries gets siphoned off by some of the people in the higher echelons of power. So she's walking a bit of a minefield there. She's going to have to be careful. And again, it comes back to it will be government-selected projects, government-selected intervention and investment into Ukraine from Canada. That ties in with Mr. Carney's strong connections back to Brookfield assets. So it is rife for serious conflict there. Most of all, I'm concerned that she brings this Keynesian economic view to Ukraine, and that will only burden their citizens for decades to come with unnecessary debt and deficits. So a little bit concerned there, obviously. That even has an impact in Canada. Of course, we're seeing any country, you can't fool the people. Or as Abraham Lincoln said, you can't fool all the people all the time. Here we have many immigrants that have come to our country, and this is something we've seen in other jurisdictions also, but have come to Canada, have benefited hugely from Canadian social programs, and once they get the education they were looking for, they depart. They go to places like, guess where? The United States. Why is that? Because they listen to their countrymen and countrywomen down there, and they say, come to the U.S. You have more freedom to enterprise, the taxes are lower, the lifestyle is better. And this should be a signal to Canadian voters that the economic overlay that's being imposed by Prime Minister Carney, which is increased spending, and we've talked about this a lot, increased spending of borrowed dollars always leads to more inflation, always leads to your buying power being eroded, and many immigrants are figuring that out and they are leaving the country. Media doesn't like to focus on that, obviously, because they think all of these economic policies are wonderful, so they don't want to focus on anything that could possibly go against that. I said last week the Minnesota fraud cases continue to be in the news. They're not going to go away, but I've said also that this is a bit of a signal to other jurisdictions, whether it be municipal, state, or national, and not just here, not just in the United States, but here in Canada also. I believe what this does, it gives politicians at the local level a real lever of influence and of power to be able to call in independent, now this is independent third-party audits, not the present auditing firms that may be on the record as auditing government spending. They don't have that same type of mandate, but bring in random audits that really dig deeply to see if the dollars are being spent correctly. I believe this is going to be an increasing trend. Watch for that, and it's a positive trend because the one thing it does is it gives elected people a little more power over the bureaucrats who often, though they may be well-meaning, have way too much sway over politicians, and politicians become afraid to raise questions on this. Well, we keep hearing about the influence of China, not just in the US, but in Canada and around the world. And we look at their military. We've talked about that before, their increasing power of AI, and how the fact that they educate all of their school kids in high-level math and science and engineering and these other skills at much broader and greater levels than we do in Canada or the US. So we are bringing up a generation who are ill-equipped educationally on these breakthrough types of technologies, and China is educating by the millions. They've got the critical mass there that to guarantee them more breakthroughs. So as they do that, we speculate on all different kind of ways that China is having influence. So I want to talk about one today, more or less on the culture side. If you have not heard of McShui, and this is McShui tea and ice cream shop, it's a Chinese-based company. There's 47,000 locations around the world, and they've just started in the U.S. And what they offer, as their name says, and it's M-I-X-U-E, but it's pronounced something like McShui. Pardon to my Chinese friends if I don't have it quite right. All of their products, whether it's, and they're going to expand, they're going to add more coffee-related items as they move into the U.S., which makes sense. They're primarily tea and ice cream in Asian countries. But all of their items are less than $5. You'll be able to get, as we see advertised in their LA location, how about a latte for $2.99? You want that same latte at Starbucks, could be over $7. Even at McDonald's, it's pushing up around the $6 mark. So talk about Chinese influence. Watch this continue to go. Only a few locations in the U.S. right now, some rumored to be in Canada. I predict that's going to take off. You can be in the know by talking to your friends about McShui. And the other thing, too, that it shows is, as prices go up and people get concerned, the price of coffee, the price of specialty coffee, the price of all these things, and then you get really insane policies as are coming from the new mayor of New York, who says the way to fix high prices is just government take over everything. That's outrageous. It's always proven to bring poverty everywhere it goes. But here is the private sector, the marketplace itself at work. I can tell you Mick Shuey is going to do far more to keep down the prices and price raises at McDonald's or at Starbucks than any kind of government intervention. That applies right across every industry, folks, whether it's housing, automobile making, whatever it is. Once you have government choosing which companies are going to be in that, once you have government trying to control the prices, or once you have government even taking over and doing the services, as the mayor of New York is planning on doing, taking over grocery stores, one of the most insane, ridiculous ideas you're ever going to run into. But people are prone to it. People are open to it. Let the private sector work. That'll always keep the prices down lowest. And another, for Canadian friends and U.S. friends, this is again another year where neither the United States nor Canada made it to the final round in the World Juniors. It's showing that Canada, always, of course, a great source of hockey and power and pride. We are simply not. Canada is not the all-time, every year best in the world in hockey. We just aren't. And, we need to admit that, but we can be happy about the fact that Canadian hockey has influenced the rest of the world, and we still have some of the best players in the world. So anyway, good job to our hockey guys, and they might get the bronze, which is a compensation prize for sure out of Finland. So anyway, skate on, everybody. Let's do our best. Let's keep having effect and changing the world. Thanks for joining in today. See you tomorrow.